Hey everybody, this is your host, Eric Simone, and I wanted to thank you for listening today. This podcast is all about life struggles and the relatable human stories that provide hope and encouragement to us all. You are not alone, and whatever you're going through in life, I hope this podcast uplifts you and encourages you to pursue Jesus and rest in his peace. Welcome to episode 4 of Heart Share, and today we have an awesome testimony from a new friend of mine, actually, that I met through my church, Oakland Church. We actually do a Saturday men's group together. His name is Dustin, and it's been absolutely awesome getting to know this guy the past few weeks, and let me tell you, he has an amazing testimony. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I want to jump right in. Here is Dustin's story.
Guess I want to start off by saying, God's got a purpose and a plan for every brother and sister out there. And until we really submit to him, we won't really know what our purpose is. And I pray every day that he shows it and brings it to light to me, what he's got me here for on this planet. And I guess my story starts off like everybody else's. I came out of my mother's womb, but I'm going to back it up a little bit and kind of share with you how it all came to light. Back in 1984, my sister was born, and my parents wanted another child shortly after, about a year apart, and so they tried and nothing was happening. And so they went to the doctors, and the doctor unfortunately told my mom that she was not allowed to have any more children, and that devastated my mom and dad. And so they tried for many years, and nothing was happening. And in the Bible, it tells you if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, that you have the ability to move mountains. And my parents were not religious or Christians or followed Christ in any way. They basically, they didn't go to church. They didn't believe that Jesus died on the cross for their sins. My dad was an alcoholic, and my dad always dabbed around with the guitar, and one day he wrote a song in prayer form and lifted it up to God, because he grew up with all sisters and never had a brother, and all he wanted was a son. So he wrote the song asking God that if he would bless him with a son. Well, about a year later, I was introduced into this world, and God did that out of faith. And that didn't change my dad or my mom in any way. They continued with their life, partying all the time. My dad was a drunk, like I said. He thought if he worked hard, he could party hard. And, they always supplied us with what we needed. We weren't rich in any form, but we always made sure I had shoes on my feet, clothes on my back, and food on the table. But about 9 years had gone by in my life, and we got a knock on the door, and there was this man from my dad's past. And he lived in Florida at the time, but God had told him to, come and kind of speak with my dad. And I had no idea who this man was. I always thought that, he was just my dad's friend, and they were catching up. But little did I know that he was preaching to my dad. And my dad wanted nothing to do with it. He was glad to see the man, but just didn't want to hear what he had to say. And a lot of it was soaked into my dad without even knowing it, and the seed was planted. And I remember one day I got out of the shower, and I'll never forget, my dad, I looked at him and said, "Hey, where did Greg go?" And my dad said, "Why? He went back to Florida." I said, "Was he an angel?" And my dad looked at me like a deer in headlights, and I'll never forget, he was just amazed by why I even said that, because I had no idea what they were talking about. And it really got to my dad and stuck to him. And about 6 months later, my dad and my mom, they were just done. He was fed up with my mom, and he decided he was going to move to Salt Lake City and just abandon his family. And he built pools, and he had a day off because it was raining, and just something happened miraculously, and he accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior. And I'll never forget it, because what I saw happen to him, I wanted it, and it brought my dad closer to me, and we built such a relationship. And at 10 years old, I got baptized and was slain down and was speaking in tongues. And as we were going forward, I was going to conferences with my dad. I loved it. But my mom and sister, they didn't quite understand, the changes that was happening in my dad's life. And as I was getting older, I was never really the best at anything or popular in school. And I remember getting bullied as a kid. And I'll never forget, my parents got me these brand new shoes from Payless, and I was excited about them, but kids would make fun of me because I didn't have the nice clothes or the nice sneakers. And we were in gym class 1 hour in junior high, and I'll never forget that this kid, everybody was waiting in line or out in their standing line, and I couldn't find my other shoe, and I looked everywhere for it. And I'll never forget, I went and found it. Some kid had thrown it into the toilet and peed all over it. And I was devastated. And I didn't want to go out there, and then the teacher came in and basically made me put on my shoe and walk out there in front of everybody while they started laughing at me because they knew what happened. And that didn't go over well with my mom. And, I always looked at my dad and said, being a Christian, how many times do I need to turn the cheek? And my dad said, as many as I possibly can. And so I thought, well, maybe I should go to a public or a private school and be around other Christians. Maybe that will help. And, my parents really couldn't afford it, but my dad was trusting in God that God would supply or provide for him. And, they made it happen. And so I started in 8th grade, started going to a private school. And I was thinking, oh, this is great. I'm going to be around Christians. And little did I know that's basically what started my rebellious stage. And I got hooked up with the wrong people. I thought, being a skater was a cool guy, so I was going to grow my hair out. And I started smoking smoking pot. And, just got involved with that. And then as I got older, I didn't really want to continue going to the private school. So I decided that I wanted to go back to a public school. And my parents were okay with it. They were going to save quite a bit of money. And so I decided to go back. And I figured now I'm going to remake myself that nobody else will know. I won't let people bully me. I'm going to act hard. I'm going to be tough so I wouldn't get picked on and bullied again. It's basically starting over. And as I was going through school, going to parties, I started drinking, sneaking out, and was getting in trouble all the time. But as I was at a party one time, I remember seeing that, the people that were dealing the drugs, they always had the money, the nice clothes, all the girls around them. They could basically do whatever they wanted, and I wanted that life. And I didn't know how to do it, but I knew if I got close with them, maybe they would be able to teach me. And I got close with this one guy who took a liking to me. And he basically showed me the ropes on how to sling the drugs and, where to start and how to do it, basically. And he fronted me a little bit to see if I was able to do it. And I was able to turn it around and within a day or so and come back, and he kept fronting me until the point where I had enough money to basically go on my own. And then I started having all the nice clothes, the nice shoes, all this money. At 17 years old, I was able to buy things that other kids weren't able to buy or have the money to do. And that's where I fell in love with the money. I kept getting bigger and bigger, and before you know it, I started surpassing my drug dealer and started finding new connects and getting higher weight. And, but with that, there always comes consequences. And I always seemed like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but really it was God, because he had a plan. He's always had a purpose and plan for me, but I didn't quite know what it was. I knew of God. I had just backslidden. I'd walked away from him. I didn't want that life because I didn't want to be convicted about it. And, he never gave up on me. He never left me or forsake me, but he was always there at the door knocking, waiting for me to open the door. And I just wasn't ready. And so I continued, but things kept coming my way. I was in and out of jail all the time. I went to jail one time. This kid ripped me off, and I decided, I'm going to get him back. So I shot up his house and ended up getting caught and going to jail for it. And I don't know how, but God always got me out of the situations, because he said basically that was not your plan for that I have for you, and I need you in this path. So he always helped somehow. I don't know how, but it was the grace of God that I was able to get out of a lot of things. But the one thing that really got onto it, I kept going, kept selling drugs, became probably the top 3 dogs out of Springfield, Illinois, because that's where I was from. And I'll never forget, I was riding home after just re-upping on a couple pounds of marijuana, and my girlfriend was driving, and I had a jacket with a secret compartment in it. And we were about 2 blocks from being home. And I'll never forget, there was a state trooper parked in a parking lot, and he just so happened to start following us. And right before we were pulling in the driveway, he pulled us over and got out and said that she had a warrant out for arrest, but it ended up being a mistake. I don't know if he ran the plates wrong, but there was always a reason that everything happens. And they had said they had her in handcuffs, and they said that I was going to be good to go but they had to search me first. And I'm thinking everything's good. I'm just going to put my jacket on and I'm going to walk away and we'll be good. But I forgot that I had a 1-hitter in my cigarette pack, and they found it. And then they gave them cause to search the vehicle, and they found my jacket, and they could feel that something was in there. And but they couldn't quite figure it out. It took them about 30 minutes to get into it. And man, I was freaking out, because I knew if they find it, I'm in big trouble. And right before the dogs came, they figured out how to get into it, and that's when I got stuck. They basically 3 felony charges I was looking at. They found over a pound of marijuana. They found about 4 ounces that was individually bagged up and ready for sale, and they found weapons and a scale on it. So I got hit with a 3 felony charge and went to jail. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I was pretty scared at that time. But, God was still knocking. And I refused to open the door. And, with the grace of God, once again, my mom had connections with the state and was able to get me out of the 3 felony charge, and it was dropped down to misdemeanors. And I had to pay fines, obviously. But the one stipulation was, to get me down, and off of that, I had to look into going into the service. So they got me in contact with Staff Sergeant, and I decided, well, I'm going to do the Marine Corps. Hoorah! They're the baddest of the bad. And so I started doing PT with them for a year. While I was practicing and training with them physically, I also had to be studying for the ASVAB test to get into the actual service. But I was never book smart. I studied so hard in school sometimes when I actually applied myself, but I could never seem to pass any test. I would always freeze at the very end. And I don't know what that, I always thought I was just stupid. But you throw me in the streets, I'll survive. I'll figure out how to live. I will get by. But in a classroom, good luck. But I just never knew what was wrong with me. And I was just always like, man, I just couldn't pass the ASVAB. I took the test, failed it. Tried it again in 30 days, took it, failed it. Then I did it again. I became 2 points from getting in, and I was devastated. I was just, man, how stupid am I? Couldn't figure it out. I can't even get into the ASVAB or in the service. This is supposed to be the last resort for people who don't know how to do anything, And I can't even get into that. I'm too stupid for that. That's what I kept telling myself. And, it dawned on me, so I just didn't know what to do with my life. Couldn't do that. So after that time has gone by, and, obviously I showed them I was trying. I couldn't get into it, so they didn't proceed on the felony charges. Everything just kind of disappeared. And I decided, I'm going to get away from this drug game. I can't afford to get caught up anymore. I was in and out of jail over 6 times. I couldn't do it anymore. And so I decided I'm going to do the straight and narrow. I'm going to actually get a job. And so I got a job, ended up getting 3 jobs, all within 6 months. And I was unloading trucks early in the morning at Pier 1. I was a dishwasher at Olive Garden, and I was working in a retirement home as a server at the time. And I had to move back home with my mom for a couple months, but I just wanted to get out on my own, and got in touch with a couple buddies, and they had a house, and they actually had a room open up, so I decided that I was going to move in with them. And just so happens he was selling drugs at the time, and he was selling pot. And every time I would get involved with it, I ended up selling whatever I could get a hold of. I would sell, man. If it didn't matter if it was acid, shrooms, marijuana, but coke was my number one thing that I ended up falling in love with. And I would sell just to have the money, just to go blow on that and get high. And but he was selling it, and I kept telling myself, no, I can't get back involved with it. But I ended up buying a pound of weed and stashing it away almost for a rainy day, just in case something happens. I can go ahead and sell it. I still have my connects, my contacts, and I could get rid of it real quick if I need to be. And but I'd smoke a lot, man. I would smoke a lot, and wherever I went, trouble just seemed to find me. And I'll never forget, I got a DUI 2 blocks from home. It always seemed to be 2 blocks from being home that I'd always get caught up. And I got a DUI, or basically got a slap on the wrist again, had to pay a fine, no probation charge or anything else like that. Like I said, man, I just don't know. Like, there was a purpose and a plan that he had me on this planet, that my parents called me the miracle child. And it must be, because I was lucky but not unlucky at the same time. And I'll never forget my dad, mom, they ended up getting divorced, and my dad was getting remarried at the time. And I went to his wedding, and my cousin was actually from Michigan, and she had driven down. And I got to telling her, I just didn't know what to do, told her my story, and was like, man, I just don't know what to do with my life. And she had mentioned that she had a spare bedroom, and that I was more than welcome to come up and start fresh, and stay with her until I could get on my feet. And I started thinking about it, and a couple months had gone by, and then I gave her a call and said, hey, you mind if I come and check it out? And she said, no, not at all. And so I booked a train ticket, went up there, and it was in January of 2010. I'll never forget, there was a snowstorm. And I mean, there was snow everywhere, and it was piled on. And I was like, there's no way I'm moving here. This is ridiculous. I don't want to live here. What am I thinking? So I came back home, decided I wasn't going to move. I gave it a couple months, and then, just trouble after trouble, and I finally lost it. And I basically, to me, I hit rock bottom. And I just decided, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the move. So I packed up my stuff, moved whatever little things I could to my dad's, sold my car, and bought a one-way train ticket, packed up 2 suitcases and a book bag, and told my girlfriend, sayonara at the last minute. She wasn't too happy about that. And made the move to Michigan on March 19th of 2010. And I just never looked back. I made sure I got a job as soon as I was up here. Since I was working at Olive Garden in Springfield, Illinois, I decided, maybe I can go and check it out, see if I can get a job at Olive Garden. They were able to get me in. I wanted to work on the line as a cook, but they didn't have any openings, so I had to go to the dishwasher, which I was all familiar with. And, getting involved with it, I started working hard. I was the only one. I didn't have any friends moving up here. I didn't have a car. So I just basically took the bus to work and took the bus home and caught a ride when I could. But I was the only one that spoke English in the dish tank, so I really didn't have an easy time making friends. And so after a while, I started kind of teaching myself. I was watching on the line when they basically get, hit with a rush. I would go over there if I was slow and try to learn how to do the recipes and learn. So I basically taught myself, and the managers were noticing that. And so they kind of moved me onto the line. And from there, I kind of started working my way up into, I got promoted into training other people. And I was working that job for a few years, and but then it was deciding, I was not doing the the hard drugs. I was just, smoking weed. My cousin was cool with it. But she had two stipulations. If I was going to move up with her, I had to do no hard drugs, couldn't do the cocaine, and I had to do something with my life, most likely go to school. So I signed up and basically started looking around and was going to school at Macomb Community College for fire science because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. But I knew I wanted to do something action, and obviously I wanted to be a cop at the time, but that was off the table with my record. And so I decided, well, firefighting is the next best thing. So I figured I'd go to school for fire science. I was doing that for a while, but I just got back into the wrong people. I'll never forget before I moved, my dad always said, you can run away wherever you go, though. If you don't change your life or yourself, that you're just going to end up finding the same people with just different faces. And that's just exactly what I did. I found the same people with just different faces and got mixed up with the wrong crowd, started doing cocaine again. And I was on probation because when I first moved here, I got a second DUI, and this time they hit me hard, and I had to do 30 days in jail. I had to pay many fines, had a breathalyzer in my car, in and out of meetings all the time. But I just went with the process, just doing what I had to do. Didn't change me at all. And I'll never forget, my cousin found out I did cocaine, and she kicked me out. She told me I had a month to get out. She didn't care where I went. I, figure it out or go back home. And I tell you what, I didn't want to go back home. I just started a life here, just bought a car, was starting to make friends, so I wanted to stay here. And I was always good at using people, and I got close with this girl. We started dating and told her, hey, man, I either got to move back home or figure something out. She said, hey, well, you can just come and live with me. So I did. I used her for what I needed, what would benefit me. And I always seemed to be good at that. And so I moved in with her. Things were going pretty well. That's what I thought anyway. And the more I got to know her, the more I just found out I just didn't want to be with this girl. And she ended up going to Florida with her parents for a vacation, had me watch the cats. And I knew I had to get out, but in order to do that, I wasn't going to be able to do it on my income at Olive Garden, so I needed to get a second job. So I went and applied and ended up getting a second job, and then by the time she got back, I'd already found an apartment. Within 2 days, I was out. And she came home, and I was gone. And that was it. Second time, I just got up and left. And got my own place, was partying hard, and nobody could tell me what to do. Got back into the drugs and having sex with any girl that I possibly could, and going out every single night, partying hard. Meanwhile, with my breathalyzer on the car, I'd get so messed up that I couldn't drive the next day, so I had to ride my bike. And that was my priority. And ended up being late for my job because I was opening up a kitchen in the morning time, and was late quite a bit of times and for my drinking, and they finally fired me, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I was not able to afford my place to live, and I didn't know what to do. And once again, I'm thinking, man, I'm just nothing goes right with me. What am I going to do? And I started dating this girl at the time. I was talking with her, and she had done a lot of modeling, and she used to be a stripper, and she had a lot of connections. And she told me one day when I lost my job, she was like, hey, man, I can get you a job being a male dancer if you're interested. And I said, oh, heck yeah. I wouldn't mind dancing for women and doing all that kind of stuff. And she said, well, the one stipulation is you're going to be dancing it's a gay strip club. And I said, well, whatever. If it pays good, I'm down to try it. And so she got me the job interview, and I remember going in there, and everybody, they seemed to like me. And they ended up hiring me on the spot and asked if I wanted to basically try it out for the hour to see if it was a fit for me. And I'll never forget, I didn't quite know what I was doing. But like anything else, when I find an interest in something, I always give it my all, and I'll practice. That's how I was able to be so successful at selling drugs. And so I figured I'm going to put my mind to it, and I'm going to make the best of the situation. And I'll never forget, I had an hour to work, and I made about $150. And to me, that was just crazy money to make so fast. I mean, I'd make my paychecks would be $250, and that would be a whole week worth of working 6 to 7 to 8 hours a day. And so I was just mind blown about how much money that this could make me. And by that time, I didn't even care if it was a gay strip club anymore. And so I got involved, and I started doing that. And I'm telling you what, about the nightlife, it's all about cocaine there. You know, it's everywhere. You can't go without getting it. And I'll never forget, man. I was doing it every night, partying. I'd get paid to go and drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and take women home at the end of the night. Because, yeah, it might have been a gay strip club, but women always would be there to get away from the nightclubs and being harassed and surrounded by guys. So they'd come for the show. And so it was just easy picking. So I just, you know, they come for the show, you take an interest in them, and you can take them home. Then I'd be going to the after hours every time, and I'd be partying until 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning every night. And it definitely takes a toll on your body. But I remember within the first year, I made $100,000 cash, tax-free. And at 23 years old, I didn't even know what to do with that kind of money. And so I just treat myself to whatever I want. I had the money to do whatever I want. I'd go out with my friends, and I'd spoil everybody. I just throw money around like it was nothing. And man, they always had that saying: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, mine was sex, drugs, and money. Those were my gods, and that's all I needed. And moving forward, I thought I had it made. I thought, this is a life, just constantly partying and partying and partying. And, but here, God was still knocking, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I had just moving so far back that I knew that he was there. I knew that he was waiting for me. I knew that there was a purpose and a plan for me, because I wasn't even supposed to be on this planet, but I wanted nothing to do with it at that time. And, I'll never forget, I had one of my customers was an old man, and he took a liking to me, and basically fell in love with me. And he was a lonely man, and nothing sexual had to come from it. He just wanted a friend. And I'll never forget, he took a big liking to me. He would take me on all these lavish trips, like all around Hawaii and Miami. Miami ended up being my spot that I went to, and I would probably went there 10 times. But he would take me on these trips. We'd buy penthouse suites we'd be staying in, buy me anything and everything I want, prostitutes, in and out, like it just, whatever I wanted, he would get me. And at first I didn't know what to think about it all, but then as the time went on, I'm just thinking, man, I have all this money at my fingertips. I don't even got to work anymore. And so he said, I'll provide if you stop. So he basically became what he calls a sugar daddy. And whatever I wanted, he would buy me. He wouldn't even ask. I would go to him and say, hey, I need $10,000. He'd write a check or just transfer right into my bank account. Buy me anything I want. He was buying me $10,000 watches, $5,000 suits. I had all the best stuff you could possibly think of. And obviously it gets to your mind. And, he bought me cars and motorcycles. And, I didn't know what to do with it all. So, I went with it. And I was living like a king, a rock star. I'd go anywhere. I would get limos to just go to the nightclubs. I would party like a celebrity. But the thing is, I would lie to everybody because I was too afraid to tell everybody where this money was coming from. So I would always tell them that, No, they all knew about me stripping at a gay strip club, but I would tell them I had a client who died and left me millions and millions of dollars because this is what this man was worth. And they wouldn't think anything of it. And so I went on with that lie for years. And, as time goes on, I just kept getting bored. So I was like, I want to open up my own club. That's where all the money is. I'm gonna open up a gay strip club and go in competition to the one that I used to work at. And so I pitched him my idea. He gave me a couple $1 million to go and invest in it and find a building. So I ended up buying an old strip club, women's strip club, and that was closed down. And so basically everything was there already, but I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on making it how I wanted it. And so I made it just to look like, a high roller strip club, but for men. And I'll never forget, but God, it's so funny how God works, because it just so happens that this strip club that I bought was literally the same building was attached to a church. And, I'll never forget, we were running into zoning problems and just all these issues, and the church was fighting us tooth and nail to not open up, especially because they knew it was going to be a gay strip club. And I'll never forget, my business partner and I, we decided to, start going to the church and get cool with the assistant pastor, which was the son of the pastor, and we started bribing him, tempting him. And he was taking our bribes, and we used that in court, and we ended up winning. And so we just deceived everyone. And but we were still coming in problems with zoning. I mean, a couple of years had gone by where we were losing all these money in court costs. So I decided, I want to do something. I'm bored. I can't sit here and keep fighting this. So this is going on, and we're still going to court for this. Why don't we open up another bar? So he gave me a couple $100,000. I went and bought a bar in Hamtramck, Michigan, and called it Temptation Lounge. And, we opened it up, had our grand opening, and everything was a success, but it started dwindling down. And, I was more once I had it open, I was more wanting to just continue my partying and just to tell everybody that I own this bar, but I wanted to really not do anything. So I made everybody else. I hired an assistant, had them do everything. I just became super lazy. Because I could. I had all this money on my fingertips, and I had all this power to be able to tell everybody what I wanted done, and if it's not done, then you were fired or you're gone. And I continued with it, and I started, continued with the women. Every time I remember, I would take girls on all these trips. I'd tell Lenny to give me, a couple $1,000, $10,000, and I was going to take these girls on these trips. I took this one girl, took her all around the East Coast, everywhere, man. We started basically Florida and worked our way up to New York, and it was a month-long vacation. And I had the money to be able to do it. I remember we went to New York, and I had the money to close down a whole shopping center, like a whole store, just so we could personally shop, just to impress the girl. And I would toss the girls aside when I was done with them, and that's just the type of guy I was. I had no remorse for any of them. But I'll never forget the girl that is now my wife. I'll never forget, we worked together at Olive Garden, and I would always try to hit on her. She always seemed to have a boyfriend, and then we just became friends with what you call benefits at that time. And I'll never forget, we were out actually playing pool one time, and she told me that she had got a job offer. She was graduating college, and they were moving her to South Carolina. And I was devastated. And, my life wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't know what to do. So I was like, why don't we just date? And, when you move, we'll call it quits. And that way we can just say we dated. Because she wanted to date me near the end, and I didn't want to. And when I found out she was leaving, it hit a part of me in my heart that I was quite sad about. So I fought for this girl because she was talking to this other guy, and I fought for her. And finally, I got her and took her on a trip to Miami. And a month later, she was pregnant, and that was not part of the plan. And as we were, we didn't quite know what to do, but I knew that I had to step up and be a man, and the right thing to do is to ask her to be my wife. And it just it hit me. So I proposed on her the day that we moved her. I proposed to her and asked her father for his hand. And her parents never quite liked me because I was always that mule that whenever she got in trouble, I introduced her to Coke, and she'd always put the blame on me. So her parents weren't pretty fond of me at the time. But I had to build up their trust. And I remember we moved her to South Carolina, and she was pregnant for 8 months until I even moved down there. I decided, to stay in Michigan to run my bars and get everything situated. And so I'd go and visit her every once in a while, but it just didn't work out too well. We're constantly still partying and doing drugs, and she didn't quite know exactly how much I was into the cocaine, and I just always had a problem with all of it. And I was just not a man, and she was at that point. She was done. She was done with me, and I decided, all right, I need to make the move down there. My newborn child that hasn't been born yet is on her way. I need to make the move down there to be with my family. I need to man up, and I finally made the move. I got everything done. Had a last party, saying basically my going away party. But my business partner, my sugar daddy, whatever you want to call him, was not happy about the whole situation. And as I moved, he started dwindling my pay and eventually cut me off. And I didn't know what to do. And I had started this lie off to Danielle, my wife, my soon-to-be wife, and that I had all this money, so she thinks we're going to be stable, and it was all based on a lie. And as I got cut off, I didn't quite know what to do. Now the clubs were half in my name, so I'm thinking maybe if this ends sour, then I'll be able to, get my portion of the money, and we'll be okay. So I figured, man, I'll hold on to this lie until I absolutely have to tell the truth. I'll tell bits and pieces of it. Because I was a pathological liar, man. I would lie to save my own butt. And I don't know. It just, time went on. We had our daughter, and we just decided, it's pretty hard to do it by yourself. So she was from Michigan. All her family's here. We decided to make the move back. And when we came back to Michigan, I basically got so upset because I was trying to get into my clubs, and Leonard, he would change the locks on me, and I had to hire an attorney. I finally got the keys back, but I was so much on revenge and spite that I went to the clubs, and I stole thousands of dollars worth of equipment and speakers and lighting and alcohol, and I was just doing everything I can, and it just, to the point where it hit me. One day, he filed a lawsuit against me for $80,000, and just because of the jealousy of my wife and that I was engaged with her, he slapped her with a $150,000 lawsuit, even more than me, and I was the one that was doing everything. And by this time, I had to come clean with everything. And it was probably one of the hardest things I had to do at that time. And as I moved forward, I ended up getting a job in sales because I figured, well, why not? I could sell drugs and be successful. I could sell my body and be successful. Sell sex and be successful. And why not sell, anything else, So I got a job selling gas and selling cell phones. And, I decided, once again, I'm going to learn everything I can, and I'm going to try and make myself the best guy, the best salesman at this company, and work my way up And so I did, and I was all on a lie. I would lie to customers, whatever I had to do to get the sale. And but became the number one salesman in the whole nation. Got offered to go to all these events and conferences. Got to travel. Was always late coming home. I was never there for my family, and it basically built a fence between my wife and I. And it just, the office that I was working at ended up moving, and it was so far away that it was not reasonable to continue working for there, and we put a lot of thought into it. We were getting ministered for my dad and my stepmom, and they all agreed that it was just time to maybe let go of that job and move on. So maybe stay home with my daughter, and I could save a lot of money on gas and on daycare, and just kind of be a stay-home dad until we could figure out what the next move was. And so I did it, but I resented my wife for it. I resented my dad for it. I'm supposed to be the one to provide for my family. I'm supposed to be the one that is the money maker. And this isn't supposed to be my life. And that's what I thought. So I had a lot of resentment held up, and I hated my wife for it. I hated being the one to have to be there. And I was going nuts, and I had to spend the rest of my money that I had saved up, that I had, over the course of time when I had all this money, I was putting money aside, and so I had to spend the rest of the money that I had on this lawsuit, and to get myself and my wife out of it. And I finally had to sign over all my rights to the clubs, and basically walk away with it. And that's what I did. And it was one of the hardest things I also had to do. I just at my life at that point, I was just stuck. I was stuck in a rut. And Jesus was still knocking, like, man, when are you going to let me in? When are you going to open the door? And I'm not ready yet. I don't know what to do. My dad always said, you're going to fall hard, but you're going to rise big. And I didn't know what to take of that. But I didn't think I had fallen hard enough yet. And my wife and I were just in and out, always arguing, almost every day, argument after argument. And, I finally started cheating on my wife, and she had caught me. And I thought she was going to leave, and I begged her. We started doing counseling, marriage counseling, but it was hard for her to trust me. And and me, I was still doing drugs. I was still sneaking out at nighttime. She'd go to bed, and I'd go down to the clubs or the after hours and do all these drugs, and then come home and pretend that, I was just on the couch the whole time. But she finally caught me, and it became to a breaking point where I was done. I was done with her crap. I didn't want to deal with it anymore, and I wanted to do what my dad was thinking about a long time ago, and I was going to get up and abandon my family. I was just going to leave. I was like, I'm done. I called my dad up. I remember it was last year on Easter. I called my dad up and I said, we just had a huge argument, and I said, I'm done. I can't take this anymore. I can't do marriage anymore. And I'm leaving. And my dad said, I tell you what, why don't you come down for a few days and get deliverance? And I said, deliverance? And he said, yeah, you got to fast for 3 days before we can give you deliverance. And I said, not only do you want me to not eat, because I love eating, you want me to starve myself, and then you want me to get this so-called deliverance? Like, okay, God, I mean, if this is what you want me to do, because this is it for me. You either come into my life right now, or I'm out. I'm done. So I cracked the door, and I went home, and I finally opened it all the way, and I gave my life to God. once again, and it just changed my life. I dropped to my knees. I was crying. I was crying over everything, every testimony I heard. Anything. It was coming to me, and I just got filled up with the Holy Spirit. And I got baptized, because I got baptized when I was 10 because I saw what happened to my dad. But this time I wanted to get baptized. I wanted to give my life fully to God. And I started getting into the Word every day. I was a new man. Everything was changed. I stopped the drugs. And I'll never forget, I was just seeing testimony. I was seeing supernatural stuff that just certain eyes you wouldn't believe. And I remember driving back after getting deliverance, and I was in the house cleaning up. My wife was at work, and I heard a voice saying, give everything unto me that's not sacred in that house. And so I did. I got a trash bag, and I went around. I didn't even know where all this stuff was hidden, but I was just trusting in God, and that He would show me where everything was. And I just started going around. I'd taken all my smoking pipes and my coke paraphernalia. I was finding coke bags and suit jackets, and just hidden everywhere. All my pornography, DVDs, magazines. I even had a sex doll, and I just kept putting everything in a trash bag. And I had this 4-foot bong, and this thing I didn't want to get rid of. I wanted to eventually, pass it down to my child and smoke with them when they get older. And I just had a hard time, but it was not hard for me to let all this stuff go because I was trusting in God at the time. And I remember going out to the outside. It was probably, into May and or April at this time, so I was still a little chilly, but I took out my bonfire pit and threw everything and took a hammer and started smashing everything and poured lighter fluid over it all and gave it up to God. Because, if you think about it, back in the Bible, man, God, people would sacrifice their best lambs and their best things in life, and to me, those were my best things. So I was giving it up I was sacrificing the things that meant the most to me. I was sacrificing it and giving it up to the Lord. And I felt so free. I got to my knees and just lifted my hands up and just started worshiping God in the middle of my backyard. And I was just trusting in God, and I was in the Word every day. And I just felt He was talking to me all the time, and the Holy Spirit was just allowing me to soak up what He had in His Word. And I'll never forget, because I was smoking cigarettes, and my wife was on me. She wanted me to quit, and I'd quit for 30 days and then stopped and I started again, and then I was keeping it a secret. And I'll never forget, she was in bed, and I lit up a cigarette, and it was like clear as day, like I'm talking here now. And it said in my head, don't take another hit and I'll free you from this. And I'm thinking, it's just in my head, because a lot of times, when God talks to us or the Holy Spirit talks to us, it's that voice in our head, and we just want to think that it's ourselves, because that's what I thought it was. I thought it was me talking to myself. So I said, oh, no, that wasn't you, God. And so I went to go take another hit, and I heard it again. If you don't take another hit, I'll free you from this. So I said, okay, God, if this is you, I'll do it out of faith. So I crumpled the rest of my pack up. I probably had about half a pack of cigarettes and crumpled it up and gave it up to God. And the next day I didn't have one desire to smoke a cigarette. He had freed me from my nicotine. I had been smoking for 10 years. And it was just things like that just kept happening. And I'll never forget, my dad introduced me to Todd White, and I was hearing all of his testimonies and listening to him every single day after I'd be in the Word. That's all I would listen to, is him, and just anything about the Bible. I had a Bible on tape and anything to just fill me with his glory. And I ended up going a couple months later. My wife, we weren't perfect. I was working on my marriage. I was giving it up to the Lord, and we went to church. We were fighting the whole way to church. And it's that time where most of the time when you're just like, I'm not going to do something, or you don't want to do something, it's the enemy telling you that, just don't do it. Make this excuse, is because he knows that God's got a reason that you need to go to and listen, because there's probably a message out of it, but the devil doesn't want you to listen to that. And my wife and I were fighting. I'm like, I'm not going to church. I don't want to deal with it, And I said, you know what? I just submitted and said, forgive me, Father. And I said, all right, I'll go. And we went to church after doing this marriage conference for the weekend. And they just so happened to have a baptism that morning. And I don't know how many times I used to nudge my wife, at being like, all right, you're going to do this? You're going to do this? And I knew that it was not me. It wasn't my will. It's got to be the Father. So I just didn't do it. I didn't think anything of it. And she got up like she was going to go to the bathroom. I didn't think anything of it. And before you know it, she's on stage. She got baptized, and I lost it. And I started crying. I couldn't stop crying the whole way home. And, it was God. And I didn't even want to go to church that morning. And if I didn't, God's will wouldn't have been done. And it just goes to show you that you when you don't want to do something, if you don't want to get up and read the Bible in the morning, if you don't want to go to service, and you're making every excuse known to man, it's most likely the enemy whispering to you, telling you all these things. But because there's a purpose and a plan that God has for you, and you should probably do it, even if you don't want to. And it touched my heart. And a couple months had gone by, and still into the Word. I'm on fire for God, and I go to Todd White Conference, and I'm seeing miracles happen. We were going on the streets, praying over the sick, praying to everybody, blessing people. And testimony after testimony. There's many I could tell you, but that's just. We had about 15 people lay hands on this guy who was in a wheelchair, and he got up and just walked, and he hadn't walked in 20 years, and it was just the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And you think my story would stop there, but it doesn't. I started dwindling, stopped reading the Word every day. It became every other day to once a week to not at all. And I remember we had our second child, and I just started losing it. I started backsliding, and I knew that I was so on fire, and I'm just thinking, man, what is wrong with me? I was so on fire for you, Lord, and now I want to go back to my old ways. And so I started smoking cigarettes again, and started smoking pot again. I did some coke again, and my marriage started just dwindling, and I'm thinking, what is going on? But, I'm thinking, I called my dad up and I'm saying, hey, I think I need deliverance again. Like it's some miraculous thing that they did, like a magic trick, but it's not. It wasn't me that had to turn to them because they're not my Heavenly Father. They're not the ones that died for my sins. Jesus did. And one day he said, you got to turn to me. You can't turn to your dad. I'm your father. And I'll never forget. At this point in my time in my marriage, I'm so sick of it. I was fed up. My wife and I were arguing, and God's just like, come on, open this door. I'm right here. And I'm like, I know you are, but I don't want to feel convicted about anything anymore. So I don't want to open the door right now. But I know you're there. I'll do it when I'm ready. But meanwhile, my marriage is just going to crap. And this time, the last straw was drawn. I was done. I filed the divorce papers. I had signed them. And my wife and I were I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. We went a whole week without even talking. And it was I just couldn't take it anymore. I felt like she wasn't a wife. She was just a roommate and we weren't even good friends at that time. It was so quiet in my house. And I wasn't in love anymore. And we were arguing, and she said, all right, she decided we started talking again. We made up, but then we fought again the next day, and then we made up. And then we were like, are we going to go to church on the Sunday? Because we weren't going to church. It had been 6 weeks before we went to church. And I said, yeah, let's go. And then we had a stupid fight And by this time, I just said, you know what? You go to, because the church that we were going to had many campus. I said, you go to Troy. I'm going to Clinton Township. You go on your own. You can take the kids. I'm just going to go by myself because I don't want to sit there and argue with you and then go and act fake in front of everybody. And so I got in my car, I got ready, and I started driving. And church started at 10:30. And, I was about 5 to 10 minutes from being there. And it was clear as day, man. The church, Oakland Church actually, popped in my head, clear as day. And I have no idea why. And I mean, I'm almost at this other church. I hadn't even thought about this church. I went there, I took my wife there. I met these guys from the Todd White Conference, and they invited me to the church. So we went there back in July. So it's been almost 6-7 months since I had even gone. And so I had no desire. It was far away from where I was living, so I didn't never wanted to really go. And but it was clear as day, and I said, "Well, what was that? Was that you, God?" And I'm still muttering under my tongue and about my wife and the argument this morning. So I didn't know what was going on. Was this you, God, or what? Why did this image pop in my head? And so I said, "All right, well, I kind of have an idea when you're trying to say something to me, God." So I pulled over in a parking lot, but I couldn't remember the name of this church, so look it up to save my life. I couldn't remember what time it started or what the name was, so I remember Googling, like, churches in Rochester, or churches in Auburn Hills, and Orion. And all these churches would pop up, I couldn't find it. And then something told me to go look in my old messages, and I had to scroll down far and finally found them. And his name was Devin, and I scrolled through his messages and finally found the old address, and I put it into Google Maps, and I found the church, and I said, "All right, Lord, if this is you, because it's 10:25 right now, if this is you, then this church better start at 11, otherwise I'm not going." And this is all in my head. And so I went to the website, and sure enough, the church started at 11 o'clock, so I said, "All right, this must be you, God. You must be wanting to tell me something." And so I drove 30 minutes, went to church, and I didn't text Devin, let him know I was coming. And I got there. I didn't know anybody at this church, and I walked in the front door, and sure enough, Devin was standing right there by the door and looked right at me, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this must be you, God." And I go over there, and he's like, "Yeah, hey, how's it going?" And I said, "Oh, everything's going great, putting on a front." He said, "Yeah, you want to sit with me and Ashley?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be great." It's like, "I got to go to the bathroom real quick." And I went to the bathroom, and it just, like, the conviction just weighed on my heart. Like, I need to open up. I need to share. I'm here for a reason. And God was not letting it go. So we went on. I said, "Man, I lied to you. Nothing is great right now. I'm stuck in my marriage. My marriage is a sham. We're about to divorce each other. I've backslidden. I want nothing to do with God. I don't know. My life is just going to crap." And he said, "Man, it's crazy that you say that, because Ashley and I were just talking about divorce." He's like, "I think, God's got a plan and a reason that you're here. And we're going to talk more after church, but let's go in right now." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." And we started going, and they're doing worship, and I'm just so hesitant. I'm resistant. I don't want to put my hands up. I don't want to worship God. I'm just like, anything. I'm trying to fight it as hard as I can. And I'll never forget I don't know who he was. I don't know if he was an assistant pastor, but he got on right before the pastor got up and started talking, and it was like he was talking straight to me. He was mentioning things about divorce and about, just everything. It was just like, nobody else was there, and I was the only one there, and he was talking to me and me only. And then it hit me. And I didn't know what to do, but I was still hesitant. And the whole message, I was getting on was, there's talk about divorce. And I knew that God at that point wanted me there to listen to that message. And at the end of church, I remember they were doing, they were telling everybody to come up. They were going to lay hands on them, their whole worship, or their whole prayer team. They were just going to anoint their hands in oil and lay hands on everybody. And I remember going up there, and there was probably about 11, 12 people standing up there. And I just so happened to look over, and I saw the guy that got up in the beginning and was literally talking right to me. And I said, man, it'd be kind of cool to go to him because he was literally talking to me, but the odds are 1 in 12, you know? So I was like, that's probably not going to happen. And I stood up there next, and then he raised his hand, and I went over to them, and it was meant to be. God was guiding me to where I needed to be, and who he wanted to speak through them to me. And I went over there, and he introduced me to his wife, and him and his wife, they both laid on their hands on me and started praying. And I mean, it was like they were a fly on the wall, and they were listening to my wife and I conversation throughout the entire weekend of divorce and everything that was going on in my life. It was like, bam, the Holy Spirit was just using them and speaking straight through them to me. And I lost it. I couldn't fight it anymore. And I just started bawling like a baby. And I just said, okay. And God was, you finally opened the door. And I said, okay, Father. I said, I finally will. I'll do it. I'll submit to you. I'll stop fighting. And I just said, I'm so sorry, Father. And I went back to my seat, and I just lifted my hands up, and I just started praying in tongues and just having a conversation with God. And it was like nobody else was there. And, you know, afterwards, Devin and his now fiance, they were just kind of ministering to me and, you know, talking to me, and said I told them basically, you know, my one thing I think that really I need to do is I need to get involved with the church because, you know, when I was on fire for God, I think the reason I was backsliding so much is because I wasn't getting involved. I was thinking I could do it all on my own, and I can't. You need fellowship, you need community, and, you know, you need to get involved and serve for the Lord. And I wasn't doing it. I was thinking that, you know, whatever, I don't want to really do it. I don't have the time. I've 2 kids, marriage. I don't have time. But this time I surrendered to God, and I gave it all to God. I sat and gave my life to God and said, I surrender to you. I submit to you, Father God. I'm bowing down. You are the only one that has this purpose and plan in my life. And I've got to stop trying to guide my life to where I want it, but allow you to guide me to where you want me to go. And so I did. And so I've been going to Oakland Church for about 5. This will be my 6th week. Got involved in a men's group and started doing this study for 4 weeks, and got involved in Grow Track and trying to get so much involved. And I made myself a little prayer room so I could get alone with God every single day and get into His Word and pray to Him about everything for at least an hour a day. And that's how I've been starting my day off. And it's amazing to see how God can just come in and change your life. I was such an angry man, and He's been giving me so much peace. And I pray for the fruits of the Spirit every single day, that I may get the love and the joy, the peace, the goodness, the kindness, the meekness, the patience, self-control, and faithfulness. And He's been delivering it. And it's just a blessing and a miracle in itself. And that I can just be okay and not get so angry with my children and not so angry with my wife when I get offended by something, but just let it go and give it my hands up, pray up to God. And that He just has blessed me with such a beautiful family and a beautiful life, and that I'm here every day to hear and worship Him. And it's just amazing. And I still, to this day, do not know what God has His purpose and plan for me. But I know that I'm submitting to Him, and I'm now walking in His path. And He's going to show me, because there's a reason I'm here. And I don't know what it is, whether it be sharing my testimony to others or just serving the church. But I'm just trusting in my Lord Savior, and that He's going to guide me. He's going to direct my path to where I've got to go. So thanks for listening.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. I hope this podcast has blessed you. Feel free to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and share with your friends and family. Till next time, and God bless.